Welcome. My name is James Snapp Jr. Today, I'm reviewing the 5th episode of the television series Bible Secrets Revealed. This episode was broadcast on December 18th, 2013, and it was called Mysterious Prophecies. Basically, 6 kinds of prophecies were covered. Prophecies about the Messiah, Daniel's prophecies about the afterlife, Daniel's prophecy about the Son of Man, Revelation's prophecies about catastrophes at the end of the world, Ezekiel's visions of God's throne chariot, and Paul's prophecy about the return of Christ. Let's talk about these subjects in order. First, prophecies about the Messiah. In the Gospel of Matthew alone, over 20 passages from the Old Testament are said to be fulfilled by Jesus, but only a couple of them were mentioned in this program. The first messianic prophecy seen in the program was a phrase from Deuteronomy 18:15, where Moses foretells the coming of a prophet like him. The program also pictured part of Matthew 21:11 and part of Luke 24:19 through 20, making it look like the New Testament authors say that Jesus was a prophet. However, in those 2 passages, Matthew and Luke do not directly call Jesus a prophet. If the entire verse had been shown, it would be clear that Matthew and Luke were reporting what other people said about Jesus. In Acts 3:22 through 26, Peter used Deuteronomy 18:15 to affirm that Jesus was the prophet like Moses. But nothing was said about that, or about the parallels between the deliverance from physical slavery accomplished through Moses and the deliverance from spiritual slavery accomplished through Jesus. Instead, Dr. Bart Ehrman said, in the Gospels of the New Testament, Jesus is called a prophet. Using Dr. Ehrman's approach, you could also say that in the Gospels, Jesus is called a demon-possessed sinner. The question is, what do the Gospel writers directly say about Jesus? They do not depict him as just a prophet. You can't get past Matthew 1:1 or Mark 1:1 without seeing the Gospel writer call Jesus the Christ. The second messianic prophecy in the show was Isaiah 53:5. Nothing was said about how the servant songs, the other parts of Isaiah that are thematically linked to this part, show how Israel's national mission was paralleled by Jesus' personal mission. Nothing was said about Isaiah 53:7's description of the servant of the Lord as someone silent before his accusers. Nothing was said about Isaiah 53:12's statement that he was numbered with the transgressors. Now, both of those passages are used in the New Testament to show that Jesus fulfilled the prophecies about the servant of the Lord. Why weren't they mentioned? Bart Ehrman said that when Christians read in the New Testament that Jesus suffered for sins, and interpreted passages like Isaiah 53 to mean that the Messiah will suffer for sins, it sounds like Jesus is fulfilling all these prophecies. Well, it would have sounded a lot more like it if viewers had at least been told what all these prophecies are. It almost seemed as if the director wanted to hide them. The next segment focused on a couple of verses from the book of Daniel, Daniel 12:2 and Daniel 12:13, which refer to a future resurrection. Here, viewers were told the secret that Daniel introduces a more developed concept of the afterlife than what is seen in other Old Testament books. Okay, no problem. But there was a problem with the comments provided by Dr. Joel Hoffman. He mentioned some events that did not happen at the same time, as if they did happen at the same time. He said, correctly, Daniel is a book about what happens at the end of time. But as he kept going, he proceeded to say, Rome was taking over. Herod was ruling Jerusalem. As if Herod and the author of the book of Daniel lived at the same time. But if you listen closely, there's a pause between his 2 statements. I suspect that in the course of his interview, Dr. Hoffman was addressing the subject of Daniel, and then he was addressing the subject of the setting of events around the time of Christ, and as a result of some bad editing, his 2 answers were blended together into one statement. In the segments about Daniel's prophecies, a lot was missing. Nothing was said about three of the most interesting aspects of the book of Daniel. Many professors, including some in this program, believe that the book of Daniel was written in the 160s BC, during the Maccabean revolt. But this was not mentioned. Nothing was said about Daniel's visions of a series of governments. Nothing was said about Daniel's symbolic descriptions of Antiochus Epiphanes, even though this is very helpful to know about when interpreting the book of Revelation. Instead, only one other passage from the book of Daniel was addressed, the depiction of the Son of Man in Daniel 7:13 through 14. Dr. Gary Burridge provided some much-needed balance to the claims of Robert Cargill, the claims that Dr. Robert Cargill made in previous episodes about Jesus' use of the phrase Son of Man. Dr. Cargill had depicted the phrase Son of Man as if it means some dude. But as Dr. Burridge points out, when Jesus used the phrase Son of Man to refer to himself, Jesus was suggesting that he was the Son of Man mentioned in Daniel's vision. The person who, as Dr. Ehrman said, is given dominion over the earth, and who brings in a perfect kingdom. In Matthew 26, and Mark 14, and Luke 22, Jesus links himself to Daniel's vision of the Son of Man. The next segment was about the book of Revelation. As in previous episodes, a lot of time was taken up with the narrative's speculative questions. Only a few specific passages from Revelation were discussed. When one particular passage was mentioned, Revelation chapter 8, verses 8 through 9, it was depicted in a very misleading way as it was presented. Dr. Elaine Pagels stated that the prophecy or the passage was intended to represent the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, which occurred in AD 79. She said that John was referring to the explosion of Mount Vesuvius when John said that a great mountain just suddenly explodes and pollutes the sea and destroys the fish. Well, if you only see the parts of the passage that was shown in this episode, the words great mountain burning with fire next to a picture of a volcano, and then the words the sea became blood next to another picture of volcanic activity, and then the words creatures were destroyed, well, it kind of fits. I think the lesson to be learned here is that whenever Prometheus Entertainment presents a passage from the Bible, beware of the ellipsis. Beware of the ... Something has been abducted. Some of the text has been taken away. Why was this done? Here is the full text of Revelation chapter 8, verses 8 and 9. It does not match up with the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. For one thing, Mount Vesuvius was not cast into the sea. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius was not accompanied by a catastrophic loss of sea vessels. And the destruction in John's vision is exponentially larger than what happened at Mount Vesuvius. When the two cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum were destroyed by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, probably less than 20,000 people there died, whereas John pictures, as you can see, the loss of a third of all life in the sea. Dr. Jennifer Nust balanced Dr. Pagel's claim that the visions seem like something out of science fiction by affirming that because Revelation uses imagery from the Old Testament, the people who were reading Revelation could get it. Dr. Jeffrey Gagan, too, points out that the description of part of the vision in Revelation 17 about Babylon the Great is not too hard to figure out. No other specific passages from Revelation were presented in this segment. The next subject was Ezekiel's vision of the throne chariot of God, found in Ezekiel 1 and 10. Dr. Gagan said that modern interpreters have described this to be like a UFO. I kind of expected this approach, since the production company responsible for the show has also produced the Ancient Aliens series. Fortunately, the professors affirmed that this vision was not about UFOs. It was intended to depict God's throne chariot. Part of the point of this vision is that God's authority is not glued to the city of Jerusalem. But instead of offering detailed interpretations of the text, all of a sudden the program became, let's learn about Kabbalah. And that went on for almost 5 minutes. When the program drifted back to the contents of the Bible, the next subject was Paul's prophecy about the coming of Christ, as found in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. This is the main basis for what some Christians call the rapture. the idea that when Christ returns, as he comes down from heaven, his followers will be taken up to him. Dr. Bart Ehrman stated that the Bible readers have taken Paul's teaching of a kind of a rapture event and Revelation's teaching of some kind of tribulation event and smashed them together as if they're talking about the same thing. However, it's not as if Paul and John describe one and only one event in the end of time. They both describe a series of events. The book of Revelation includes a vision of the harvest of the earth, and in 2 Thessalonians, Paul foresees the rise of a great enemy of the church. So yes, if we pretended that other parts of Revelation do not exist, and that other parts of Paul's letters to the Thessalonians don't exist, we could conclude that their prophecies don't interlock. But that's not a very sound approach, is it? As the program began to wrap up, Dr. Gary Burge noted that Jesus doesn't give specifics about when he will return. And now this point came and went very quickly, but it's one of the most important statements in the program. Jesus warned against false prophets who set specific dates for his return. Some prophecies in the Bible were meant to remain mysterious. The last 2 minutes of the program did not describe any specific prophecies in the Bible. In conclusion, although this episode was not the worst show about biblical prophecy I've ever seen, it had its share of problems. Some interview material sounded like it was out of place, and repeatedly, parts of Bible passages were removed by that ... when if the entire verse had been shown, this would have drawn into question the plausibility of claims made by Dr. Pagels and claims made by Dr. Ehrman. Both as a general overview and as a study of specific passages, there just wasn't much to this episode. A lot of important prophetic passages were left out, and a lot of filler was put in. Watching this episode was like reading a map of Indiana that doesn't show South Bend, or Lafayette, or Fort Wayne, or Muncie, but does include a street map of Louisville. At least one lesson may be learned from this program. There are no shortcuts to an accurate understanding of the prophecies of the Bible. Thank you for watching. The television program, Bible Secrets Revealed, Mysterious Prophecies, was broadcast on the History Channel, copyright 2013, A&D, Televisions Networks, LLC, all rights reserved, and was produced by Prometheus Entertainment. Its contents were cited as part of a review.